She moved through the corridor with her head down, pushing a cleaning cart like she was apologizing for existing. In a building made of chrome and innovation, where billion-dollar algorithms were born in soundproof conference rooms, it was she, the invisible woman, who would do the impossible. If you believe real strength isn't measured by money or status but by compassion, hit subscribe. The kind of people who look down on Mary wouldn't. The billionaire's daughter. She was unreachable, catatonic, and shattered. 9 caregivers had resigned. Psychiatrists had declared her hopeless. The 6-year-old hadn't spoken in 8 months, hadn't eaten without force, hadn't shown interest in anything since the night armed intruders destroyed her world. Until one rainy afternoon, when a 49-year-old black janitor hummed an old gospel song while mopping an executive floor, and a catatonic child walked out of her father's office for the first time in weeks, drawn to a stranger who understood what it meant to survive the unsurvivable. What no one at Andrea Technologies knew, what the CEO would soon discover, was that Mary Martin wasn't just a janitor. She had a past that made her the only person in that building qualified to reach his daughter. And once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. On the 45th floor of Andrea Technologies' headquarters in Silicon Valley, behind glass walls and multi-million-dollar negotiations, Vincent Andrea, billionaire tech mogul, stared at his laptop screen. Another psychiatric evaluation of Emily. The latest specialist had given up. Patient demonstrates severe dissociative symptoms following acute trauma. Residential psychiatric care is strongly recommended. He slammed the lid shut. Not again. This was the 9th. 8 months ago, 3 armed men had broken into their Palo Alto mansion while Vincent was traveling for business. Emily's mother, Catherine, was critically injured trying to protect Emily. Catherine survived, but the attack left her with permanent brain damage. She now resided in a specialized care facility in San Jose, unable to recognize her own daughter. Emily had witnessed everything from her hiding spot in the bedroom closet, every sound, every scream, every moment her world shattered. Since that night, Emily had become a shell. She wouldn't speak, barely ate, and spent hours staring at nothing. When touched unexpectedly, she screamed. When people got too close, she retreated into herself completely. Vincent had tried everything. Elite trauma specialist from Boston Children's Hospital, child behavioral psychologist from Stanford, and even equine therapy at a ranch in Napa Valley. Nothing worked. Emily wouldn't connect with anyone. She spent her days clutching a blank-faced, stuffed rabbit, sitting in corners, existing, but not living. His executive team was growing restless. Vincent, once the sharpest innovator in Silicon Valley, had become distant, missing board meetings, canceling investor calls, working from home more frequently. Andrea Technologies was on the verge of a $2 billion merger with a European conglomerate, but he couldn't focus. Investors were pressuring him. Board members were asking questions. And though he refused to admit it, he was crumbling. That's when his executive assistant convinced him to post the position. Seeking a specialized caregiver with a calm temperament, trauma experience preferred. $20,000 per month, immediate start. Discretion essential. Even with the absurd compensation, no one wanted it. Agencies declined after reviewing Emily's case file. Some candidates came for interviews and left after a single meeting with Emily. Others couldn't handle her silence, her sudden episodes, the haunting way she stared through people as if they didn't exist. One woman from a prestigious nanny service claimed after 3 hours, "There's something broken in that house, like grief has soaked into the walls." Vincent stopped sleeping. The mansion, though luxurious with its 12 bedrooms and infinity pool, had become a tomb of silence. Toys sat untouched in Emily's playroom. The lights stayed dimmed. Food went uneaten. Emily wandered the marble floors in socks, dragging her feet, hair unbrushed, eyes vacant. One afternoon he brought in yet another caregiver, an older woman with kind eyes, highly recommended by Catherine's former colleague. Emily refused to look at her. When the woman approached gently with a stuffed animal, Emily screamed, "You're not my mama! Get away!" The caregiver left in tears, apologizing profusely. The next morning, Vincent made a decision. Emily couldn't stay home alone anymore, and he had critical meetings scheduled all week. He would bring her to the office. He had no idea that this decision would change everything. The invisible woman who cleaned his floors held the key to reaching his daughter. Within days, he would be forced to choose between his company's image and his daughter's life. That the woman the world had stopped seeing would become the most important person in both their lives. But first, he had to survive one more morning of watching his daughter disappear a little more. Morning arrived gray and reluctant. Vincent brought Emily through the building's underground parking garage to avoid the main entrance. She wore rumpled pajamas under a too large winter coat, her hair unbrushed and tangled. In her arms, clutched tight against her chest, was the blank-faced, stuffed rabbit, the only object she tolerated touching. Employees whispered as they passed through the lobby. Some stared openly before quickly looking away when Vincent's eyes met theirs. Others pretended not to notice the small ghost child trailing behind the CEO, her bare feet shuffling in oversized slippers that made soft scraping sounds against the polished floors. The private room Vincent had prepared sat at the end of the executive corridor. Door propped open, soft lighting installed, a plush rug covering the cold tile. Inside, he'd arranged everything the child psychologists recommended. Sensory toys in muted colors, picture books about feelings, a beanbag chair, a small table set with crayons and paper. Emily walked past all of it. She went directly to the corner farthest from the door, slid down the wall, and pulled her knees to her chest. The rabbit's blank button eyes stared at nothing, her own eyes just as empty, fixed on a spot on the opposite wall. Vincent knelt beside her, not too close. "Emily, sweetheart, I'll be right down the hall if you need me. There are toys, books, whatever you want." She didn't blink, didn't acknowledge his presence. He stood slowly, his knees protesting. "I love you," he whispered to the silence. From his office 3 doors down, Vincent pulled up the security camera feed on his tablet. Throughout the morning, between conference calls and emails marked urgent, he checked obsessively. The image never changed. Emily in the corner, rocking slightly, the rabbit pressed to her face. By midday, the lunch tray he'd sent in sat untouched on the small table. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever changed. Early afternoon brought Mary Martin to the executive floor. Her cleaning cart wheels squeaked softly as she pushed it down the corridor, the same methodical route she'd taken every weekday for 11 months. She noticed the new room immediately. The open door, the camera mounted in the corner, the handwritten "Do Not Disturb" sign taped beside the doorframe. She cleaned around it quietly, respecting boundaries the way invisible people learn to do. She wiped down the water cooler, emptied small trash bins from empty offices, straightened magazines in the waiting area that no one ever read. As she mopped near the elevators, she began to hum. It was unconscious, something she did when she thought she was alone. An old gospel song her grandmother had taught her when she was Emily's age. "His eye is on the sparrow." The melody was gentle, wordless, more breath than sound. The door to Emily's room opened. Mary stopped humming. Her hands froze on the mop handle. Emily stood in the doorway, a tiny silhouette backlit by the soft lighting. She stared at Mary, not through her, the way she looked at everyone else. At her. They looked at each other for a long moment. Mary didn't move, didn't speak. She'd learned in her years as a nurse that sometimes the best intervention was simply waiting. Emily took one step into the hallway, then another. Her slippers made that soft scraping sound. She walked closer, stopped about 6 feet away, and slowly lowered herself to the floor right there in the hallway. Just sat down cross-legged, the rabbit in her lap. Mary understood something unspoken. She slowly set down her mop, walked over, and sat down too, back against the wall, legs stretched out, careful to maintain distance. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, didn't try to fill the silence with false cheer or therapeutic techniques. She just sat. After a few minutes, she began humming again, softly. The same melody, gentle as a lullaby. Emily's shoulders, which had been hunched up near her ears, slowly relaxed. Her breathing, which had been shallow and quick, deepened. For the first time in 8 months, the tension drained from her small body. In his office, Vincent nearly dropped his phone. He stared at the security feed, unable to process what he was seeing. Emily had left her room. Emily was sitting in the hallway, with the janitor. Emily wasn't screaming, wasn't running. She was calm. Every instinct screamed at him to rush out there, to intervene, to control the situation. But something stopped him, some deeper understanding that what he was witnessing was fragile, sacred. He called security, his voice tight. "Who is that woman? The janitor on the executive floor?" "One moment, sir." Keys clicking. "Mary Martin, contract employee through Prestige Cleaning Services. Background check clear. Been with us almost a year." Vincent watched for 30 minutes. They sat together in silence except for Mary's soft humming. Eventually, Mary stood slowly, picked up her mop, and continued cleaning. Emily watched her every movement, the rhythmic swish of the mop, the careful way Mary wrung it out, the quiet efficiency of her work. Then Emily stood and slowly walked back into her room. Vincent sat stunned, confused, and for the first time in months, hopeful. The next day, Emily did something that made Vincent's breath catch. The moment they arrived at the office, she walked directly to the hallway where she'd sat with Mary. She sat down in the exact same spot and waited. When Mary arrived for her shift and saw Emily waiting, something passed between them. A recognition, an understanding. Without words, Mary sat beside her again. This time, Mary reached into her cleaning cart and pulled out fabric scraps and a needle. They were remnants, mismatched pieces in faded colors, probably salvaged from old clothes. She threaded the needle and began hand-sewing a small doll, her movements rhythmic and therapeutic. Emily watched, transfixed, the needle moving in and out, the fabric taking shape, Mary's weathered hands creating something from nothing. After 20 minutes, Mary placed the unfinished doll on the floor between them, a small offering, and stood to continue her work. Emily picked it up. Her fingers traced the crude stitching, felt the soft fabric, and explored the emerging shape. She held it close. When the lunch tray arrived, Emily did something impossible. She carried the doll with her to the table, and for the first time in 8 months she ate 3 small bites of her sandwich. Vincent, watching the security feed from his office, felt tears streaming down his face. Who was this woman? And why could she reach Emily when no one else could? Over the next 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. A routine developed. Quiet, unspoken, but as reliable as sunrise. Each morning, Emily walked directly to their spot in the hallway. She'd sit cross-legged on the polished floor, the fabric doll clutched in one hand, the stuffed rabbit in the other, and wait. When Mary arrived at precisely 8 a.m., pushing her squeaking cart, Emily's shoulders would relax. Mary sat with her during her 30-minute lunch break. She'd pull out her needle and fabric scraps, humming gospel melodies while her weathered hands created small dolls in different colors, yellow with button eyes, blue with yarn hair, red with a stitched smile. Emily watched every movement, mesmerized by the transformation of nothing into something. Then Emily began following Mary during her cleaning rounds. She'd walk alongside the cart, pushing it sometimes when Mary let her, watching as Mary wiped down conference tables, emptied trash bins, straightened chairs. There was something soothing about the rhythm of ordinary tasks, the circular motion of wiping, the careful folding of towels, the precise straightening of waiting room magazines. Emily still didn't speak, but her body told a different story. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for 8 months began to dissolve. She stopped rocking, stopped flinching at sudden movements. Her eyes, once vacant and distant, began tracking movement again, showing interest. She started eating. Not full meals, but small amounts. Half a sandwich, a few crackers, some apple slices. Enough that Vincent stopped panicking every time a lunch tray was delivered. Most remarkably, she slept through the night. No screaming, no nightmares, no wandering the house at 3 a.m. Vincent would check on her and find her curled peacefully under the covers, the fabric doll tucked under her chin. Vincent documented everything obsessively. Notes on his phone, screenshots of security footage, timestamps of small victories. Each change filled him with hope and confusion in equal measure. How was this possible? What was Mary doing that 9 trained professionals couldn't? One Wednesday afternoon, everything shifted. Vincent had a crucial investor meeting in the main conference room. Representatives from a European conglomerate considering the $2 billion merger. He'd asked Mary to stay nearby, and Emily was supposed to remain in her private room with her dolls and books. But 20 minutes into the presentation, a security guard's radio crackled in the hallway. A sharp static burst followed by garbled voices. Emily, who'd wandered into an empty meeting room down the hall, froze. The sound was too similar. Too close to the night 3 men with radios had destroyed her world. Panic hit like a physical force. She couldn't breathe. Her chest constricted. The room spun. She crawled under the conference table, hyperventilating, unreachable, drowning in memories. A junior analyst found her first. "Someone get Mr. Andrea. It's his daughter." Staff gathered at the doorway, uncertain, whispering. One woman knelt by the table, trying to coax Emily out. "Sweetie, it's okay. You're safe. Can you come out?" Emily's breathing grew more rapid, more shallow. Her lips were turning pale. Someone ran for Vincent, someone else called security, and someone, thinking practically, said, "Get the janitor lady, the one the kid likes." Mary appeared within minutes. She took in the scene at a glance. The crowd, the panic, the small child curled in a ball under expensive furniture. She didn't ask permission or wait for authorization. She simply handed her spray bottle to the nearest person, got down on her knees and crawled under the table. She didn't try to touch Emily, didn't speak. She just pulled fabric scraps from her apron pocket, threaded a needle with practiced ease, and began humming while hand sewing. Her presence was calm, unhurried, completely present. The humming was soft, that same gospel melody, gentle as a lullaby. Within minutes, Emily's breathing began to slow. The rigid panic in her small body started to dissolve. She reached out tentatively and touched the fabric in Mary's hands. Then, in a whisper so soft it was almost inaudible, Emily spoke her first words in 8 months. "What color are you making it?" Mary's hands paused. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Whatever color you need it to be, baby." Emily crawled into Mary's lap. Mary's arms closed around her, protective, warm, safe. Vincent arrived breathless, tie loosened, panic on his face. He dropped to his knees beside the table and saw them. Mary holding Emily, both crying softly, the needle and fabric forgotten on the floor. He was overwhelmed, grateful, confused, and desperately in need of answers. That night, Vincent couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office, the house silent around him, and opened his laptop. He needed to understand who Mary Martin really was. He ran a comprehensive background check, pulling everything his resources could access. What he found left him staring at the screen for an hour. Mary Catherine Martin, former pediatric trauma nurse at Newark Medical Center. The articles were old but glowing. She'd pioneered child-centered care protocols for young trauma victims. In 1997, she won the Nightingale Award for Compassionate Care. Nursing journals featured her innovative approaches. Local news stations profiled her work with children who'd witnessed violence, experienced abuse, and survived disasters. Then abruptly, in 1999, she vanished from professional life. Vincent found the reason in a Newark Star-Ledger obituary. Maya Elizabeth Martin, age 15, killed in a drive-by shooting. Wrong place, wrong time. An innocent bystander caught in gang crossfire. Survived by her mother, Mary Catherine Martin. After that, nothing. No employment records, no professional presence. Mary had disappeared. She resurfaced years later working minimum-wage cleaning jobs through contract agencies, invisible work for invisible pay. Vincent stared at newspaper clippings showing a younger, vibrant Mary accepting awards, surrounded by grateful families and healed children. Then he looked at Maya's obituary photo, a beautiful teenager with her mother's eyes and a bright smile. The woman his company paid $15 an hour possessed expertise his money couldn't buy. She understood trauma because she'd lived through the worst kind. She knew how to reach broken children because she'd once been the best at it, before losing her own child shattered her completely. The next afternoon, Emily led Mary to the supply closet on the executive floor. It had become her chosen safe space. Small, enclosed, quiet, smelling of clean linen and lemon cleaner. Mary was folding towels when Emily asked softly, "Did you ever lose someone?" Mary's hands stopped. They trembled slightly as she set down the towel. She could have deflected, changed the subject, protected herself, but Emily deserved truth. "My daughter Maya," Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She was 15. I stopped being a nurse because I couldn't save her." Emily looked up with eyes that held too much understanding for a 6-year-old. "My mama didn't die, but she's different now. It's like losing her anyway." Mary began to cry. Real tears. The first she'd allowed herself in years. Grief she'd buried under 15 years of cleaning floors and staying invisible. Emily climbed into her lap without hesitation. Small arms wrapped around Mary's neck. They held each other's grief. Two broken souls who understood that some losses never heal. They just become part of who you are. In his office, Vincent checked the security camera out of habit. He watched this sacred moment unfold and realized something profound that changed everything. Mary wasn't helping Emily. They were healing each other. The meeting request came through Vincent's assistant at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Urgent, executive conference room. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Vincent walked in to find his chief operating officer, Richard Brennan, at the head of the table. 3 board members flanked him, all men in expensive suits with expressions that broadcast concern. HR Director Karen Westfield sat to the right, a manila folder open in front of her. "Vincent, thank you for coming," Richard began, his tone carefully neutral. "We need to discuss the situation with the janitor." Vincent felt his jaw tighten. "Her name is Mary Martin." Karen cleared her throat. "Mr. Andrea, we understand your daughter has formed an attachment to one of the cleaning staff. We've received concerns from several employees about the appropriateness of this relationship." "Appropriateness?" Vincent repeated. Richard leaned forward. "Vincent, we're talking about inappropriate boundaries, liability concerns. This woman has no proper credentials to be working with a traumatized child. HR has documented multiple instances of unsupervised contact." "She's been helping my daughter heal," Vincent said, voice tight. "We don't really know this woman," Karen interjected, flipping through her folder. "What are her real intentions? Why is she spending so much time with your daughter? The optics alone." The unspoken subtext hung in the air like poison. Vincent heard what they weren't saying, a black janitor spending time alone with a wealthy white child. Their concerns had nothing to do with credentials. "This is a Fortune 500 company," Richard continued. "We have protocols, insurance considerations, duty of care standards. The merger discussions with the European consortium are at a critical stage. Investors are asking questions about your focus, your judgment." One of the board members spoke up. "Andrea Technologies can't afford the liability risk. We're recommending immediate action. Reassign Mary Martin to night shift, eliminating all contact with your daughter, or terminate the contract with Prestige Cleaning entirely." Vincent felt trapped between two impossibilities. His daughter's life or his company's future? The merger is worth $2 billion, Richard said quietly. Don't throw it away over a janitor. Comment: justice for Mary if you'd never side with people who judge others by their job title. Only the cold-hearted would scroll past this. Vincent looked at their faces, concerned, serious, certain they were protecting the company, and he made the decision that would haunt him for days. Reassign her to night shift, effective immediately. The next morning, Emily walked directly to their spot in the hallway. She sat down, the fabric doll in her lap, and waited. Mary didn't come. Emily waited through morning, through lunch, through afternoon. She searched the executive floor, the cafeteria, the lobby. Mary was gone. Vincent tried to explain. Sweetheart, Mary is still working here. She just comes at different times now. Emily stared at him with those ancient eyes and turned away. She stopped eating. Not a single bite. Not that day, not the next, not the day after. The lunch trays came and went untouched. She retreated into her private room and wouldn't come out. The catatonic state returned, worse than before. She sat in the corner, rocking, clutching the fabric doll and the stuffed rabbit. Her eyes went vacant again. The small spark of life Mary had kindled began to die. By day 4, Vincent found Emily collapsed on the floor of her room, unconscious. He rushed her to San Francisco Children's Hospital, running red lights, praying desperately. Emergency room staff swarmed her, IV fluids, vital signs, oxygen levels. Severe dehydration and malnutrition, the doctors said. Her electrolytes were dangerously imbalanced. Emily refused all treatment. She wouldn't open her eyes, wouldn't respond to voices, wouldn't squeeze the doctor's hand. We may need to consider a feeding tube, one doctor said quietly, and psychiatric evaluation for an involuntary hold. Vincent sat beside her hospital bed, holding her small hand. Please, Emily, please come back to me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Emily's lips moved, barely a whisper. I want Mary. Like this video, if you believe no system should punish kindness, let's prove that empathy is louder than greed. Vincent's hand shook as he pulled out his phone. He found Mary's number in the HR files and called. Mary? This is Vincent Andrea. Emily is in the hospital. She's... His voice broke. Please come, now. I'll send a car. 20 minutes later, Mary rushed into the pediatric ward, still wearing her cleaning uniform from her night shift. She found Emily's room and pushed through the door. Emily's eyes opened. She reached for Mary with trembling hands, whispered through cracked lips. They tried to take you away like they took Mama away. Mary didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the hospital bed, careful of the IV lines, and gathered Emily close. I'm here, baby. I'm here. Nobody's taking me anywhere. Vincent watched from the doorway, tears streaming down his face, understanding finally breaking through like dawn. Protecting Emily meant defying every corporate protocol he'd ever enforced. Vincent called an emergency board meeting for the next morning. Mary stood in the corner at his insistence, wearing her uniform, dignified and silent. He threw a stack of papers onto the conference table. Old newspaper clippings, nursing certifications, awards, journal articles. This woman has more credentials than everyone in this room combined, Vincent said, his voice cold and controlled. Mary Catherine Martin, Nightingale Award winner, pioneer of child-centered trauma care. She didn't hide her past. We never bothered to look past her uniform. Richard Brennan straightened. Vincent, this is still inappropriate. The attachment your daughter has formed is unhealthy codependency. Vincent's voice turned to ice. My daughter hadn't spoken in 8 months, hadn't eaten without force-feeding, hadn't smiled, and Mary changed that in 2 weeks. If you call that codependency, then clearly you've never loved anyone. Silence. Mary Martin will be hired directly by Andrea Technologies as Director of Child Wellness Services. She will design and lead a new trauma-informed care program. Starting salary, $180,000 annually. This is not negotiable. Two board members stood immediately. This is unacceptable. We resign. Vincent didn't even look at them. Anyone else want to leave? The door's open. My daughter's life is worth more than your comfort. No one else moved. 18 months later, the grand ballroom at the San Francisco Marriott glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant attire. The inaugural gala for the Maya Foundation, a comprehensive trauma care center for children, had drawn donors, medical professionals, educators, and families from across the country. Mary took the stage in an elegant navy dress, her hair styled, no longer invisible, no longer apologizing for existing. She spoke to a room full of people who finally saw her. For 15 years, I believed I had nothing left to give. That grief had emptied me completely. But one little girl taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding purpose in what we've survived. Emily, now 8 years old and thriving in second grade, sat in the front row. She wore a yellow dress and held a fabric doll, the first one Mary had ever made for her. When Mary finished speaking, Emily stood and said clearly, her voice strong, "Mary didn't fix me. She sat with me until I was ready to fix myself." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Vincent stood beside Emily, tears streaming down his face, understanding finally complete. He hadn't just saved Emily. Mary had saved them all. Mary descended from the stage and took Emily's hand. Between them, the fabric doll is symbol of patience, presence, and the quiet work of healing. In a world that measures worth in degrees and dollars, two broken souls proved that healing speaks a different language entirely, one of presence, patience, and the quiet courage to sit beside someone in their darkness until they're ready to find the light. Subscribe if you'd never side with those who called Mary just a janitor. Only people who've lost their humanity wouldn't.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.